Hey everybody, Carve here, trying a little experiment. I am a big fan of travel bloggers and travel vloggers, and I've had kind of an interest in becoming one. But I'm not Walter's World, I'm not Mark Weems, I'm certainly not Rick Steves. I am not somebody who can afford a lot of high-end production equipment, and I'm certainly not going to carry a tripod and all that around when I am visiting a new place because I am there on vacation. It's not my job, it's what I'm doing for fun. So this experiment is kind of the primitive version of all that, and it's my first steps into the travel vlogging world. This is from a trip I took in April of 2023. I only had about 40 hours in town, and I packed it as full as I possibly could, saw everything that I thought would be interesting, and I wanted to tell you about it. And because I was exhausted by the time it was all done, I really was, I decided to call this little adventure Things to Do in Denver When You're Half Dead. Now, let me clarify that while I shot this on beautiful spring days and I got some good pictures, I did not carry a tripod and video equipment around with me everywhere I went. I don't think people really want to watch me sit there and eat lunch. Again, I don't have enough money to drop on a production team to follow me around with video and sound equipment. So this is just photos. I also want to clarify that while I did do my research, I did about 2 weeks worth of research into Denver before I went. Um, I can't claim to be an expert in that town. I'm not a local. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I saw the best of everything. I did Google the best restaurants. I Googled the best things to see, and I went to quite a few of them. But, oftentimes you see these videos and it's like, here are the 10 best places to eat in Tokyo. Well, that person doesn't know that. They haven't eaten at all the places in Tokyo. You're probably going to see the 10 places they did eat based on some research. That's basically what happened with my Denver trip. I knew I'd have 40 hours. I knew I'd have a certain set number of meals. I Googled around. I went to eater.com, EATER. I'm very fond of that. If you Google best places to eat right now in Denver or wherever you're going, a lot of times one of the first things that comes up is eater.com, and I've gotten great recommendations from them. I will also say that folks in the real estate game often post videos about the best places to eat or live or best things to see in a community, trying to attract people to move there and buy houses. And a lot of times you get really good recommendations that way. I looked at Fodor's, I looked at, uh, I don't remember who all I looked at, but I did my research. Okay. So these aren't the 10 best, but they are pretty good things to see. And I do recommend them to you. I stayed in the Holiday Inn Express Denver downtown. Perfectly functional hotel, cost me about 120 a night. And one thing I really liked about it was super easy to get to. $10.50 will buy you a day's public transit pass in Denver, including the A line that goes to and forth from downtown Union Station in Denver to the Denver airport. Denver airport is, of course, a hub. I had been to Denver many times, probably half a dozen times, but I had never left the airport. Now, my wife and I had had a not so fun adventure with a certain budget airline that I won't name. We chose this airline because they offered really cheap tickets to Denver, and they advertise a certain vivacious, soulful attitude toward life, if you follow me, and extremely inexpensive tickets. Well, I can't speak to their attitude. I can't say the tickets were cheap, but unfortunately, due to some misadventures, largely the fault of SeaTac security, honestly. We had missed our flight by just a matter of minutes. And this airline was nice enough to give me some credit. So I decided I'm going to use that credit. I love traveling. It was about to expire. I'm going to go to a place that I can afford to fly to with that money, someplace I've never been. Denver fit the bill. It's an American city, should be fairly easy to get around, lots of interesting things to do and eat. And I didn't know anything about it. So, Andiamo, let's go on an adventure. I go off to Denver. Now, as I say, you get on the A train, your $10.50 transit pass will get you there. Do buy the pass. Don't try and cheap out. Don't try and duck out of paying, because I rode the train a few times, and at least half the times somebody did come by and ask to see my ticket. So spend the 10.50. It's worth it. You get on the A train, you're going to be on there for about 6 or 7 stops. It'll take you about 40, 45 minutes, and it will plunk you down right downtown. From there, you can get on the shuttle bus that does a loop around the downtown. You can't miss it. It's a big red bus. There's stops everywhere, and it's super inexpensive. And you get on the train and go farther downtown, and that will take you to the hotel or to any of the perfectly decent hotels that are downtown. One thing I will say about Denver that I noticed very quickly is it has a surprising scarcity of car traffic for a city that size. What I mean by that is virtually any time of day, if I wanted to cross the street, intersection or no, I could do that. Broad daylight, just walk right across the street. It was perfectly safe. You can see for it seems like a mile in every direction between the buildings. Uh, I don't know if that's a tribute to the town's public transportation system, but at any rate, it was refreshing and nice, and it lets you hear nature a little bit downtown. I quite enjoyed that. The people of Denver are really interesting. It is a very multi-ethnic town. Certainly a lot of indigenous and Native American folks, but also a lot of Asian folks. And um, eh, you know, that's always great to see in a city. It's great to hear multiple languages, and it is great to benefit from the art and the culture, and especially the food that all those different groups of people bring. Denver certainly fits the bill in that regard. One of the first things I did in Denver, as a matter of fact, was go to dinner. And I went to a place called Bruto. And the O, I think, has a slash through it, Scandinavian style or something, which is strange because it's inspired largely by Mexican cuisine. It's a small place, only 16 counter seats and a few tables. It does have a brick oven so they can make their own bread and things like that. The head chef there is Chef Michael Diaz de Leon, and kudos to him because he is actually, as we speak, as I record this, a finalist for a James Beard Award. Now, I'm recording this on May 11th. June 5th will be the ceremony when he will learn, and we will all learn if he won. But he was the only chef from Colorado, as I understand it, to make the finals this year. But he's up for James Beard Award, and they were already aware of that when I was there. It was a big deal. The service at this place, as befits a very small restaurant, serving omakase type counter meals, chef's choice. Uh, you'll have a choice of one or two things, but basically they're going to bring you what they want you to eat, and each of the sous chefs contributes something. For a restaurant that small and paying the bill you're going to pay, you expect excellent service. And I got that. I got service with a handshake. I got service where the server introduced himself by name and asked my name and got to know me and made sure that I was ready for my uh, reserved seating. Definitely, if you want to eat at Bruto, and you should, make reservations. Even in the middle of the week, it was hopping. I was there, I think, on a Tuesday night, and it was quite full. I'm going to tell you about the courses. The first course that we got was a mock ceviche. There was no seafood in it at all. In fact, there was no meat in it at all. It was made of apple and heart of palm. It had a foam on it of some kind. Anyway, very tasty. You also have the option, by the way, of getting a cocktail pairing. That was extra, and I didn't necessarily want a cocktail with every one of my courses. Some of them were gin based, and I don't love gin. Also, I was a little tired from the flight anyway, and I wanted to enjoy my meal. So I ordered my drinks selectively. I ordered with this first course something called a Michoacan cocktail. It was tequila based, and it was very tasty. The next course was a roasted pumpkin squash. It was prepared two ways in a row. So what you got was kind of like a really well roasted potato in terms of consistency. It was in a spicy mole. that had no chocolate in it. It wasn't that kind of mole. It was actually made of pumpkin and tamarind rind and peanuts, we think. I was sitting with some hipster foodies and we were trying to pick all that out. And I made a few notes, but that's what was in the mole was delicious and set the pace really for the meal because it let you know that Chef de Leon was not afraid of a few Scovilles of heat. The spice level was very intense, very, very delicious. Honestly, I thought at the time, man, I would love this mole slathered all over a super rare hamburger. Boy, that would be fantastic. I wish I knew how to make that mole. Should have Googled the recipe. Maybe it's out there somewhere. The next course was billed as a tostada. I actually thought it tasted a little more like a tacho. Basically, it was made out of fancy masa, house pickled onions. They pride themselves on house pickling all kinds of things at Bruto. And so basically, what we got was haute cuisine that had a strong essence of Taco Bell about it. That kind of industrial cumin Amerimex kind of flavor. I am not complaining when it is 11 p.m. at night and nothing else is open. Taco Bell actually tastes pretty delicious. I am Hispanic American myself. I draw a hard moat between real Mexican cuisine and Taco Bell, but I kind of love both. Next course was chili colorado on a cream cheese raviolo, and I gotta tell you, in my notes, the word that I wrote down to describe this course was sublime. It was just fantastic. An amazing cream cheese raviolo. Best chili Colorado sauce I've ever had in my life. Fantastic. And then it came with not just fresh baked bread, but just baked bread, fresh out of that oven that I showed you earlier. And there was some sweet chili butter that went with it. Fantastic. Easily the best course I ate all night, and one of the best things I ate in Denver. That alone should have qualified the guy for a beer nomination. It was really good. So imagine how good the protein course was going to be. Oh my goodness. Well, it was bison, not my favorite protein. And this bison was trying really hard to be duck. And honestly, I would have preferred duck, but it did a pretty good impersonation. A Melissa Villaseñor quality impersonation. And then it came with a congee that was quite good. I liked that a lot. Dessert was Basque cheesecake. Now, apparently, Basque cheesecake, according to the server, is charred or burnt on purpose. And it comes with chantilly cream. And you can taste the char, not unpleasantly. The chantilly cream is very sweet, of course. I love chantilly cream. Put it all together, had a lovely finish. It was a very complex dish. Um, I just thought it was delicious. Fantastic meal, worth what I paid for it. Definitely a theatrical experience with the servers moving about and preparing things right in front of you, things coming out of the oven. The kitchen is actually across the hall, at least the working kitchen, right? And so things are going back and forth, and it was kind of dinner theater. It was a wonderful experience, and I liked Bruto a lot. It felt kind of like omakase at a high-end sushi restaurant. There was a weird moment at the end of my meal where the server pointed out that they had a little, take and leave library associated with the restaurant, and they had a book group, I guess, that meets there or something. Anyway, he said, he said, I want to talk to you about book recommendations. And the way he brought that up and what he said about it led me to believe that maybe he had Googled me and discovered that I'm an author. A little strange to be Googled by your server. My wife suggested that he might be cyber stalking me. I don't know. But anyway, call it very personalized service. And then it was back to the hotel and off to sleep. Now, by the way, this was a working vacation for me in that I'm a salaried employee of the state. That's my day job. And so I was working. I had to carry my laptop around with me everywhere I went and stop frequently and conduct business. which meant that I was carrying a heavy pack around all day, and I think that contributed to my exhaustion. But it did give me the freedom to walk around downtown and eat where I liked and get out in the sunshine. I forgot to put on sunscreen, and it's amazing I didn't sunburn my scalp, but I didn't. Uh, the next day was a weekday, and it was my big walk around day. Starting with, I passed the Capitol, the Colorado State Capitol. That was designed by architect Elijah E. Myers. Took several years to build, of course, and it was completed in 1901. Beautiful gilded dome up top. It's a lovely building, and the area around the Capitol has a transit center and has a lot of buildings we're going to talk about in a bit. It's a public space, really quite lovely, and a lot of beautiful things in a very narrow radius. So, take the A train, get on the public transit system, the cheapy bus, the red bus, go to the Capitol area, and you will see all kinds of wonderful buildings and beautiful things. Almost everything I'm going to talk about for the next several minutes is in that little area. Lots of cool things to see. Starting with the Denver Art Museum. Now, when I was Googling Denver, virtually every place I went said, this is the place you got to see if you're a tourist. The Capitol, yes. But first, go to the Denver Art Museum. The Denver Art Museum has two main buildings. I will start with the Martin Building, which was designed by the Italian architect Gio Ponti. And generally speaking, when I go to an art museum like this, I like to start at the top floor and work my way down. First time I did that was at the Guggenheim for obvious reasons, and it's worked out pretty well since then. Now, the top floor collection is the Petrie Institute of Western American Art at the Martin Building of the Denver Art Museum. And of course, that makes sense. It makes sense that Denver, Colorado would have wonderful Western American art. Normally, this is not the genre I am drawn to first, to be honest, but they had some really good stuff. And by way of introduction to the Denver Art Museum, let me say this. All of the other travel bloggers and travel recommendation sites, they were right. The Denver Art Museum is amazing. It has an amazing collection for a city of this size, and it's very well laid out, very beautifully arranged. The buildings themselves are worth seeing, and it was just a lot of fun. I had a great time in a relatively short period of time at the Denver Art Museum, so I recommend it very highly. We're going to start with a painting called A Mountain Symphony, Longs Peak, Rocky Mountain National Park, Colorado. Long title, by the Swedish-American painter Sven Birger Sandsen. This was completed in 1927. It's just lovely. There are a lot of wonderful paintings and photographs in the Denver Art Museum of Longs Peak. I've never been to Longs Peak. Apparently, it's beautiful because everybody wanted to paint it. Some of you maybe can confirm if you have been to Longs Peak. Then comes an Ada Sterke painting called A Pueblo, Taos, as in Taos, New Mexico. This is from 19. The museum's curator's notes for this say Sterke traveled widely in her life and was considered something of a free spirit. She had a bob haircut, smoked cigarettes, whoa, and was divorced by the age of 25. That harlot. She was born in Olney, Illinois, studied in Chicago and Paris before splitting her time between Tunisia in North Africa and the American Southwest. What a cool dame, right? I bet she was amazing. Ada Sterke, Estasterchi. And she made this remarkable painting in kind of an illustrator style. Very cool. It caught my eye immediately. Here's another painting of Longs Peak. It's called Estes Park, Longs Peak. It's by Albert Bierstadt, who I think was American, weirdly. 1877. Here is Family Harvest by Don Cohen. Remarkable for its photorealism, I think, and for taking the mundane and finding art and beauty in that. Now, this next piece is a very large painting. It towers over you when you're in the gallery, and it is by Don Stinson. It is called High Beams and Starlight Beyond Absence, double negative, July 2003, p.m. Another long painting. This one takes a little explanation. This is actually a painting of an artwork. Another artwork called Double Negative, and it's an earth sculpture by Michael Helzer. Basically, Helzer dug a carefully conceived and executed hole in the ground, kind of a negative space sculpture, if you understand what I mean. He made a sculpture by digging a hole, an anti-sculpture, an unsculpture. It was a new concept to me. But then along comes Don Stinson, who then puts a car down in the hole, shines headlights on the wall of the hole, and then he paints that. This is an amazing and photorealistic, but also dreamlike painting, not only because of the subject, but because of the way it's lit. Those are stars, and in fact, what look like nebulae or galaxies are visible in this beautiful, clear, amazing night sky. And then, of course, the gallery itself is thoughtfully lit. And so, what happens is, as you walk around the painting and take a look at it from different sides, the light, the actual interior room lighting from the gallery changes on the painting and changes the colors and changes the way you see it. I suppose that's true of any painting anywhere, but it has a really remarkable effect on this particular piece. And I just stared at it for a long time. Um, really interesting piece of work. Here's a Fernand Lundgren painting from around 1896 called In the Abyss, Grand Canyon. This trip that Lundgren took was, a painting trip, but it was a work trip too. It was funded by Santa Fe Railway. What they wanted was images they could use to promote travel out into the desert. People in the 19th century, many of whom were Christian apparently, had this fascination with desert cultures after all their readings from the Old Testament. And I don't know, I suppose North Africa or the Middle East were a little too intimidating, a little too daunting for those Europeans and Americans to go visit. So instead, some of them went out into the American Southwest and they found these amazing landscapes, just huge, wide open spaces, and interesting indigenous cultures, of course. Look, we could have a whole conversation, and we'll get into this a little more later, about the commercialization and capitalization on indigenous tribes and indigenous cultures and subcultures, and basically treating them as if they were an artwork to be seen and enjoyed. Obviously, in the 21st century, we have some mixed feelings about that, but these were travel vlog images to people, and they were fascinating. And subcultures do fascinate us. Um, so, maybe those paintings and sculptures did some good too in terms of bringing attention to these folks and allowing us to empathize with them, allowing Western and European and American white folks to understand those cultures a little bit better and to put themselves in those cultures' shoes. I don't know. It's a very complicated subject, and I don't claim to have all the answers on that, but it is an interesting conversation. And here we are. Here's the Santa Fe Railway saying, "Come out and see Indians." Here's the kinds of things you'll see. You'll see these amazing, wild, deep landscapes like the abyss of the Grand Canyon. This bronze sculpture by Ed Mell is from 2009. It's called Jackknife. It is stylized, of course. It is geometric, and yet, of course, you can see exactly what it is. Rider on horseback. It's an interesting way to capture that image, I think. Again, very striking piece. Long's Peak and Flatirons. This is by Colorado artist Tracy Felix, a friend of the museum. Raymond Johnson did a Pueblo series piece called A Coma. This one was finished in 1927. Kenneth Miller Adams in 1946 painted Reaper's Harvest. I love the composition of this painting. It reminded me of Van Gogh or something. The swirling composition pulls your eye around in kind of an infinity symbol, and that motion of your eye tracks what would be the motion of these laborers as they bring in the harvest. It's almost a way to capture a movie in one image. Isn't that amazing? Vivid colors. Yosemite is from 1865. It's by an English painter named Thomas Hill. This painting came out a year after President Lincoln created the Yosemite Grant, which was kind of an early version of kind of a national parks grant. Here's Yosemite, come out and we're going to protect it. We're going to keep land developers off of it. And we're going to leave this wilderness open for you to go see it. Thanks, Abe. We appreciate that. Good plan. You know, if you listen to a rock song on MP3 or a CD, chances are you're hearing a pretty accurate reproduction of what was recorded in the studio or in the concert hall or wherever. As long as the number of instruments is small and it's in a fairly narrow space, narrow volume. I have noticed with art museums that in addition to the thrill of seeing something in person that most people have only seen on a page or on a poster, Um, the truth is, there's something about our modern printing process that does not capture paint colors well. And to understand what these paintings really look like, you have to see them in person, I think. And that was particularly true of Reaper's Harvest. I've now since seen reproduced images of it, and it is just not the same. I mean, it's beautiful. I'm giving you the best image I can, and you're allowed to take photos in the museum, by the way, as long as you don't use a flash. So these are all my pictures that I took with my Android phone. Um, Obviously, you're not going to get the full vivid brilliance of the image, and especially of the colors, the pigments. But I'll give you the best idea of that I can. Another floor down, we go to the Near Est to Far West Special Collection. This is all the Occidental artists, European and American and otherwise, who became fascinated with the Near East in the late 1800s. The alien nature of the place to them, from their perspective, the exotic Near East. And there was a sexy quality to it, undeniably, that a lot of male artists were transfixed by things that they couldn't see in their Victorian culture. For example, here is the Frederick Arthur Bridgman painting, An Oriental Beauty. This is from the late 1800s. Now, if you ask me, this looks like an Occidental beauty, doesn't it? This looks like a European model in a wig wearing Oriental-ish clothes, right? But again, she gets to do this sexy pose, and it's kind of Vaseline and softcore and Cinemax After Dark, and there's no denying that that was some of the appeal to these male painters. I don't think you have to learn much about Paul Gauguin, for example, to know that's true. I mean, if you want exotic, alien, sensationalized flesh on parade. Here is Cleopatra Embarking on the Nile by Luc Olivier Merson. It's considered French Orientalism. it's 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 definitely as French as it is Oriental. Um, After Napoleon conducted his campaigns in Egypt, Egyptomania broke out in Europe. He brought back these artifacts while he stole them, right? Captured them and brought them back. And the British Museum is thanking him to this day, I'm sure. So is the Louvre. But people developed this mania for Egypt, and paintings like this just sealed the deal. I mean, you can almost imagine this on a late 1800s teenager's dorm room wall, right? I mean, look at all these fabulous hotties on a boat. Are you kidding me? It's a party boat. I don't know, striking image. Then there's Jean-Léon Gérôme's Dance of the Almeh from 1863. Again, really just kind of a high art excuse for showing a lot of fabulous babes. Um, hey, who doesn't like pretty girls, right? Eugène Delacroix, 1862, painted Tiger and Snake. Now, this was not painted from the scene. He's not like Marlon Perkins' Wild Kingdom out there recording images. He's actually working from specimens probably that were brought back to France. He did travel to the Near East and North Africa once, I think, and he took a lot of sketches and made a lot of drawings, but this was painted later on after he returned to Europe. And lastly, I just want you to see this. This is a painting, a poster, I should say, by the Courier Litho Company. This is a promotional poster for Buffalo Bills, Wild West, and Congress of Rough Riders of the World. Cool. And notice the featured performer. His name, according to the poster, is an Arab. Yes, that's right. Americans and Europeans of the late 19th century, you can see an Arab live and in person. How exotic. Now we go to the collection that is bound to be my jam because I love the post-impressionists. I love it. I love impressionism. This collection is the 19th century in European and American art, and it is absolutely up my alley. We'll start with a painting from around 1510. This is by the Italian painter Bernardo Zenale. It's called Madonna and Child with Saints, a familiar subject to anyone who's studied medieval and Renaissance art in any kind of detail at all. And you can see we're on the cusp of the Renaissance. Why? Because all the normally 2D stuff, the flat picture of it's kind of like a coloring book picture, right? Like people are the wrong size, there's no attention paid to perspective or anything like that. I've never quite understood this. How it is that people could look at a scene and not just bake in perspective just by painting what they see, I don't understand. But somebody around the 1500s had to figure out the rules of perspective. And you can see that starting to happen. If you look at the grotto, there's a little bit of a depth to that, a little bit of a 3D frame to put these biblical figures in. Now we get to the Danish-French painter Camille Pissarro, and this is a painting, I'll translate it into English. It's called Autumn Poplars, Eragny. Eragny is the location. This is from about 1894. Beautiful, beautiful. One of my favorite French painters, Gustave Caillebotte, in 1883 gave us Boats Moored on the Seine at Argenteuil, if I have mispronounced that French place name, Argenteuil. I apologize to my francophone and francophiliac viewers, but I do love Caillebotte. I just think he's awesome. Another, actually French-American painter, Andrew Dasberg. This is for a little bit later, 1926. He was working in Taos, New Mexico. This painting is called Chante Lane. Maybe it's Chantet. I don't know. Chantet. If that's in Taos and anybody knows Taos well, you can tell me. I find the colors and the sort of blurry weirdness of this painting very interesting. It looks to me like simulations I have seen online of an acid trip. Now, I have never had the pleasure or torment of being on an acid trip myself. I am not the kind of person people just randomly offer LSD to, apparently, and I wouldn't know where to get it. So I've never had an acid trip, but I have read about them extensively and watched videos about them. I've read Michael Pollan, people like that. And it seems to me, and again, some of you could maybe corroborate this, it looks to me like what that lane would look like if you were just starting to peak on an acid trip. Interesting that that was captured. Oh boy, would you believe the Denver Art Museum has a pretty good supply of Claude Monet paintings. This one is Bateau de Pêche, fishing boats from 1883. And then here from 1885 is another Monet, the Seine near Giverny, which is where Monet lived. At the end of his life, he built a little estate and he had it carefully designed, including that pond, you know, the pond from Water Lilies with the Japanese style arched bridge. Yeah, he had all that landscaped and designed and made his own little painting landscape to his own specifications. He even blacktopped the road nearby so that people traveling the road wouldn't kick up dust and mess up the lighting. And that was his own little utopia that he built at Giverny. Well, this is the Seine near Giverny. We'll get to Monet again in a second. Surely not water lilies, right? I mean, there's only a few of those paintings, and surely they're in much more prominent name brand art museums than the one in Denver. Well, here's American painter Willard Leroy Metcalf, and this painting is called The 10-Cent Breakfast. Given that it was the late 19th century, I bet 10 cents bought breakfast for everybody. I like this one because it reminds me, in terms of the composition and lighting, it reminds me a lot of Rembrandt. It feels like Rembrandt to me. A lot of people know Rembrandt from the Night Watch. This one feels kind of like the Anatomy Lesson, if you know that Rembrandt painting. To me, I don't know. Maybe it was inspired by Rembrandt. Look, not all Impressionist painters were male, believe it or not. Monet had a student named Eva Gonzalez, spelled like Gonzalez, but it was probably Gonzalez because she was French. This one's from around 1868, and it is called The Window, and had a female Impressionist painter. And isn't it lovely? It actually kind of feels like I don't know, like a Caillebotte or something. Beautiful. Here's a painting you may have seen before. I'm planning to travel to Venice here in about 4.5 months, and so I've definitely seen it. It's a Canaletto painting from 1724 or thereabouts called Venice, the Molo from the Bacino di San Marco. And of course, there's the Campanile, the famous bell tower, and this is the public square that you see at the eastern tip of Venice, I believe. What? They have a water lilies at the Denver Art Museum? Yes, this one's from 1904, as all the water lilies probably were. But here's something I love about water lilies, and something I love about impression altogether. You know, you can walk right up to this thing, stand right next to it, take a picture of it like I did. What you discover as you look at it is that it is not photorealistic. It's not. This is not really what the world looks like. It's just splotches of paint. And yet, you can tell what every square inch of that painting represents. It's not an abstract. I mean, it swooshes and piles and globs, but you can tell that it's the reflection on the water. And no, it's not photorealistic exactly. It doesn't match one to one. The refraction is strange, but you know exactly what you're seeing. And it's the impression that scene gives as you look at it, including the feel of the surface tension and the water, the liquid. It almost seems to have a mass to it. You almost feel like you can reach your hand in and swirl things around. What an amazing painting! What an amazing painter! Now we get to a really good collection of Asian art. This piece, this sculptural piece, knocked me out. This is by Lin Danhua, and it is called Ash number 125 or 125. Ash number 125. It's not paper. It's not made of paper. It's not burnt paper at all. This is glazed and then painted porcelain. It, it's a lot more solid than paper, but it sure doesn't look it. It looks like it could blow away if a puff of air hit it. Remarkable piece of work. Not all art is paintings or sculptures, of course. Architecture can be art, and this is a detail, you might say, of the Palace of the King, of its facade. It's actually a third of the facade from the Swat Valley in Pakistan from 1835. Three of these lined up in a row, and there was an arch in the middle, apparently big enough to walk an elephant through, although historically speaking, nobody ever did, but they were ready in case somebody wanted to. And it was painted according to the principles of Islamic art. One of those principles being that to paint a living being is seen as a little blasphemous, a little sacrilegious, because only God is qualified, right? Only Allah can make living things. And so it's presumptuous of us, the tradition says, to try and steal a little bit of Allah's thunder. So they don't do that. They They use calligraphy and they use geometric designs, and that's how this is decorated. It's sculpted in beautiful geometric designs. Every square inch of it is covered, and it's a way of showing off the wealth and taste of the king. It's showing off. Let's face it, a lot of art is about showing off how smart and brilliant rich people are, because rich people can afford to have those pieces commissioned. Now, there's a room full of work called Her Brush, Japanese women artists. And these women, in the early part of the 20th century, many of them, uh, late 19th century others, they, quote, took the tonsure. And what that means is basically they became a Buddhist nun. And so even though Buddhist culture around them at the time restricted the rights of women to write and to create and to communicate and to travel in particular, especially by themselves, if you became a nun, suddenly you had the right to do all those things. So in a lot the same way that medieval uh, young men and women sometimes chose a life in a monastery or in a convent because it exposed them to intellectual circles and they were allowed to follow intellectual pursuits. It's kind of like becoming a college professor, I suppose. The same is true in Buddhist culture. And so smart, independent spirited women would often become nuns, and then they had the freedom to do what they wanted to do. Um, that gives us an interesting quote by Tagami Kikusha, who took the tonsure herself. She writes here, by the way, she was an author and a nun and a poet. She worked often in haiku, but this was one of her poems, translated into English, of course, from Japanese. I took leave of this floating world the day I thought I wished to see every famous nook and corner under the heavens and pay homage to every shrine and temple. I just took to the road all by myself. End quote. That was something she got to do. And there were a few of those folks who chose that life for understandable reasons, including a woman by the name of Otagaki Rengetsu. This is a painting of Rengetsu working in her hut. The painting was made 60 years after Rengetsu died, and it was painted by Suganuma Oho in 1935. You can understand why Rengetsu's scholastic life would be of appeal to a Japanese woman 60 years later. This book folds out accordion style and is illustrated by the author in inks. This is Rengetsu's travel journal to Arashiyama. Yeah, it's an illustrated travel blog. Rengetsu chose to travel this floating world and explore every nook and corner. And she wrote about her travels and drew little illustrations to let you know what she saw on her way to and from Arashiyama. It must not have been a long trip because actually a lot of the book is toward the end, it's blank pages. She didn't use much of the book. What a waste of paper. But what a beautiful book. Hirata Gyokuon, around 1839 or 1840. This is ink and color on silk. It's called Queen Mother of the West and Attendant. Then we get to newer pieces. This piece is actually a South Korean artist by the name of Lim Ok Sang. This is from 2021. And Lim Ok Sang is from the Minjung movement or the People's Art movement in South Korea. And this painting, I think we can call it that, is called Not a Bowl 2, Roman numeral 2. And it's not just a paint, it's actually clay on canvas. But it's not a bowl. This is not a pipe. It's a painting of a pipe, right? This is not a bowl. This tray is lacquered, and then it has these beautiful mother of pearl inlays on it. They were from abalone shells brought from New Zealand by artist Okada Yuji for his 2004 piece Sound of Wind. This tray, Sound of Wind, is just gorgeous to look at. Just beautiful. It just shimmers. And we'll step back in time a little bit to the 1200s. This is Shiva Nataraja. It's a bronze sculpture from the Tamil Nadu province of India. And Shiva, the goddess, is dancing the universe in and out of existence. And at the bottom, you can see she is trampling the infant demon of forgetfulness. I don't know what any of that means, but it is metal, bronze specifically. Now, to get to the modern and contemporary art collection, you have to cross over. You can use a bridge over the plaza into the Hamilton Building, which was designed by architect Daniel Libeskind. And as you cross over the bridge, and by the way, what a striking building, the Hamilton, uh, with that sharp point. Just beautiful to look at all by itself. You get to a Gail Folwell bronze sculpture along the way called Tête à Tête. Of course, that's French for head to head, or we might say face to face. Here's the John Fudge painting. It's Roundup Time in Heaven from 1985, and it looks a lot like common Hispanic American images of religious salvation or road to Damascus type experiences. But in this case, the people who are having that salvation experience are squirrels, and to them, the divine in the sky looks a lot like an acorn. Isn't that fun? Beautiful and colorful, and you know, as often happens with this art, the colors just do not reproduce as well as I'd like. You can take pictures in the museum, by the way, as long as you don't use a flash. They allow that, but I was just using an Android camera, and you know, many megapixels as I could squeeze into it, but it just does not capture the colors. And by the way, I've looked at many of these images since I got back from Denver, and the colors just don't reproduce the way they should. So get out there and go see it. Get to the museum. If you're ever in Denver, go by and take a look at these beautiful pieces of art. This next piece is a photograph called Erasure 4, and it is by Ana Teresa Fernandez, Mexican American performance artist and visual artist. It was taken in 2015. Fernandez is known for performance pieces where she does things like she paints herself white, or she paints the part of the border wall white. She whitewashes it to comment on how we don't think about those kinds of situations much. We don't give them the thought that they probably deserve. In this particular image, she is painting herself with a thick black paint. It looks like crude oil. I'm sorry, I don't remember exactly what she was commenting on here, but a very striking piece. You know, it looks abstract. For the first few seconds you're looking at it, you just think you're seeing globs and swirls of paint, and it's a photo. When you look a little closer and your eye kind of finishes processing what it's seeing, you realize that it's a photograph of her painting her own neck. Now, this is a Frederick William McMoney's bronze sculpture from 1890. It's in one of the uh, passageways between galleries. It's a sculpture of Diana, the goddess of the hunt. I just love the pose, all that lithe beauty and smooth, graceful power, all poised on one foot, ready to go. She means business. She is on the hunt. This is a painting called Time and Duration, an abstract piece by German painter Max Ernst from 1948. Love the colors, love the shapes. You know, furniture can be art if you make it well enough, and this is wood. The exposed parts have been gilded or covered with silk. It's from about 1810, so it's a Regency style neoclassical chaise longue from England. We don't know the craftsperson who made it, but it went through Christie's, so it's probably worth a pretty penny. And then the last piece I'll show you from the Denver Art Museum is a screen print on paper by Seattle-born artist Cleon Patterson. It's called Divided We Stand, United We Fall. And as you look at it, you might guess it's from 2021, and it is. And you can imagine what it represents. It's blood red, and what this vivid piece is intended to make us think about. Now, of course, if you're in Denver, you probably want to see the state capitol. There it is, and with that beautiful golden dome. And this obelisk was intended as a tribute to everyone from Colorado who served in the armed forces. Here are the steps to the Capitol. Now, I couldn't actually go inside. There was some kind of an event. And in fact, people were shooting promotional video on the steps, so I had to take images pretty carefully to frame around them. But most of the way up the steps, you will reach this marker, little nondescript marker, that actually represents the exact elevation of a mile high. Well, I think it's actually a couple of steps off, but it's right there. Once you've hit that marker, you're pretty much a mile in the air. I didn't suffer too much respiratorily. Respiratorily, I didn't have trouble breathing, but I did get tired pretty easy. Also in that plaza is the Central Library of Denver. The architect is Michael Graves, and the exterior is pretty interesting. The interior is really remarkable. Beautiful spaces in there. Not a huge collection, to be honest, but a great children's library inside. The architect of the Central Library, Michael Graves. Sort of over by the Denver Art Museum is the Civic Center Park, and that archway, which is a more modest facsimile of an arch from the Columbian Exposition. That's called the Voorhees Memorial. John Voorhees, I had to Google him. Um, Essentially, what he was a rich guy who helped found their country club. He was the owner of a successful galena mine, and he made a lot of money. And that's that and his mustache were really the most interesting thing about him. He paid for this arch and the plaza that was paid for out of his estate. He demanded a commemorative memorial arch in his will, and since he was paying for it, he got it. So there you go. That's the Voorhees Arch, if you're curious. Lunch that day was at a wonderful Italian restaurant called Tavernetta, which is over by Union Station. In fact, it's in the little mall building, the shopping center building that's right next to Union Station. Tavernetta, I had rigatoni dish that had the flavor profile and the ingredients of cacio e pepe. If you know that Roman dish, lots of cheese and lots of black pepper. I love black pepper, and I love cacio e pepe. And this pasta that I had at Tavernetta was just delicious. Wonderful cocktail too. I love Tavernetta. Great restaurant. Great easy casual, upscale casual. I would say, affordable, delicious food. It had also been recommended to me that I go to the Denver Museum of Contemporary Art. Hey, I love contemporary art, but you know what? I got to be honest with you. The building itself, lovely. It was designed by Sir David Ajayi. I'm sure I have butchered his pronunciation, as he was born in Tanzania to Ghanaian parents. He's Ghanaian British. It's from 2007. The building was completed in 2007. By the way, Sir David also designed the National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. So you can see why he was knighted here about 9, 10 years ago. He designed the Denver Museum of Contemporary Art, and it is a beautiful building. But here's the upstairs interior. It's kind of bare in there. Um, when they say contemporary art, what they mean is art that was just completed. Like, these are brand new pieces of work. And I'm sure it rotates in and out. I did not care for much of the art that was in there. I'm just being honest. Your mileage may vary, your taste may vary, but pretty much all of the contemporary art that I saw in Denver that I loved was actually over at the Denver Art Museum in their collection. But Denver Museum of Contemporary Art, worth your time. Go check it out. I had dinner that night at a restaurant called L5, ELFIVE. And it's called that because it's on the fifth floor of an office building. In fact, the truth is L5 is really hard to find. I had it on Google Maps and I had to walk around the block 3 times before I even figured out how to get in. You kind of walk into where they're valet parking people. I was walking. You walk into where they're valet parking people inside this little underground apartment style garage, and there's a barely marked door. It has a 5 on it. You go in there, and there's a woman at a desk who greets you, and once she checks that you have a reservation, you have to have a reservation, You get in an elevator. It just looks like any apartment elevator, totally low key. You almost feel like you need a password to get in. And you go up to the fifth floor and you open out into this restaurant that is surrounded on three sides and change, like 270 degrees of the most amazing hilltop view of Denver. The city just stretches all around you. And if you're like me and you've read your travel blogs, you know to show up close to sundown, which is when I got there. Here was dinner. It's patatas bravas, wonderful kind of Romanesco garlic aioli type sauce. These tacos are actually lamb shank and veg on a chickpea shell. So they were like soft tacos. And when I first bit into them, I thought they were just fantastic. But that chickpea tortilla does not age well, I got to tell you. So if you go and you order the chickpea and lamb shank tacos, eat them quickly. Share them with a friend. These are small plates. It's kind of like Southwestern style tapas kind of. Um, the filling is delicious, and actually the taco was great when I first bit into it. But eat them fast. And then a beer. Denver is beer country when in Rome, right? When you're in Rome, you drink wine and aperitifs. And when you're in Denver, you drink beer. And I like beer with tacos. Sure, why not? So the beer I ordered was a Call to Arms Operation Steingraber. It's a dark beer from locally made breweries there in Denver. Really good beer, really good food, especially when I first bit in. And here is the view west as the sun is going down over Denver from L5. Now, L5 is directly over. I could actually look down from my table out onto a little courtyard area. And in that courtyard area is a giant metal milk jug. It's that mimetic architecture where it looks like something else. That is a business called Little Man Ice Cream. Little Man Ice Cream. And on recommendation from the guests around me, I ordered the purple cow flavor, which is black raspberry with white and dark chocolate chunks. Delicious, wonderful ice cream. I mean, even bad ice cream is pretty good, right? But this was delightful. You got a lot of good ice cream choices in Denver. In fact, Bruto is in an area called the Dairy Block, and one of the businesses in the Dairy Block is Comicello Gelato. This was their daily offerings. Look at all those amazing exotic flavors. There's also a pretty good ice cream place inside the Crawford Hotel lobby, which I'll tell you about right now. Union Station sits right next to the Crawford Hotel, and it's this old Beaux-Arts hotel that has been restored and revitalized by Triba Architects. That was in 2014 that they put their refinishing touches on it. Beautiful old hotel. You can actually stay in the hotel, and then there's all kinds of restaurants in there. There's a bookstore, a wonderful seating area. By the way, if you're going to sit in the seating area, make sure you've bought something because security will ask you. They don't want people just sitting in their chairs unless they're either staying at the hotel or they are eating something they bought in that area. I know, but you get it. Anyway, um, I did try some ice cream there as well. When are you going to get to try ice cream twice in the same 40 hours? Well, that's when you're traveling. I also, the next day, I got up. That was going to be my travel day home. I started the day by going on that red bus to Union Station. I walked into the Crawford Hotel lobby. Here is their beautiful chandeliers overhead. Aren't those nice? Replacing, I understand, some flat fluorescent bulbs is what used to be in there. And then I had breakfast at Snooze AM, which is this diner that's inside the lobby area there. Um, these were banana and something pancakes. I don't know. I don't remember. By this point, I was so exhausted I could barely see straight. But that was my trip to Denver, and if you've got 40 hours, hey, you could do a lot worse than going to Bruto and Tavernetta, and especially the Denver Art Museum with its wonderful collection and its beautiful buildings to see. That whole area downtown is lovely, and you won't be overwhelmed by car traffic. People won't harass you. You know, I never felt like I was in any danger or anything like that. I saw a lot of women walking around singly and in pairs, and they didn't seem to be that concerned. So it's a lovely downtown area, very Western feel. It kind of felt like, with apologies to my Oklahoma friends, it felt like Oklahoma City if Oklahoma City had much cooler stuff. I know you got the Memorial and the Cowboy Hall of Fame and Bricktown, and I know Oklahoma City's pretty cool, but Denver has you beat. Denver is like really cool Oklahoma City. My wife and I, our next trip will be to Seattle. We're going to the Showbox to see uh, two metal bands that my wife loves, Ailstorm and Glory Hammer. We won't be taking any pictures on that trip. Even when we have dinner at Sushi Kashiba, uh, Itamai or Sushi Chef Shiro Kashiba runs that place, and we're going to have omakase there. Drop a ton of money on delicious Seattle sushi. It's going to be phenomenal. I'm really looking forward to it, but I'm not going to do a travel vlog about that one. Then, in about a month after that, or a little more, we're going to Burlington, Vermont, and from there we're going to across the border to Montreal, Quebec, Canada. I've wanted to go to Montreal since I saw the Anthony Bourdain episode about it, where he went to Joe Beef and Au Pied de Cochon. We're going to both places. We're going to have some delicious foie gras poutine, and if you're really lucky, I might take a camera and take some pictures of that. But until next time, if there is a next time, I sincerely appreciate you watching this whole thing. I know we're probably over an hour by this point, but I hope you loved that run through the museum and have some reason next time you're in the Denver airport, if you're there for a layover of any time, you know, grab an Uber, grab a cab, or grab that A line train and get out and see Denver. Enjoy the place, at least the area around Union Station and the Capitol. Thanks, everybody.